Welcome back to the Build Bodies podcast. I'm your host, Alan Jaramillo, and in today's episode, we are going to be talking about FOMO, but not in relation to missing out on events or parties or going out. We're going to be talking about FOMO with food. As someone who has struggled with saying no to extra food at the dinner table, going out to a restaurant or a get-together over the weekend, I have been someone who has had a lot of lack of control surrounding food, being able to say no when I'm truly full, being able to say no to stay more disciplined towards my fitness goals. And I've always personally had that emotional attachment to food. It's more of a comfort thing for me. And while working with hundreds of clients over the years, I've continuously seen this come up with a lot of our check-ins, going back and forth about how they can't control themselves in social situations. So I'm going to talk about some of the research behind FOMO and eating out and how it relates to one another. And I'm also going to bring into light some of the different ways that we can counteract this or improve upon it. And before we get into the material, I want to say thank you so much for listening. If you want to support this podcast and future episodes to continue to be released, I would really appreciate leaving a review on Spotify or Apple Music if you're listening there. And if you want to leave a comment and a like on YouTube, that would be awesome. So Gupta and Sharma conducted a study in 2021, and this study is called The Fear of Missing Out, a brief overview of origin, theoretical underpinnings, and relationship with mental health. And there were a lot of interesting things that I personally thought that stuck out about this specific article. And I'm going to read them word for word just so that we're on the same page, okay? So FOMO basically broadcasts more options that can be pursued, and this impacts an individual's decision-making in personal and professional settings, all right? And when it comes to their well-being and how it ties into that, young adults with high levels of FOMO are less likely to report their own lifestyle as healthy, okay? The feelings of envy and social exclusion are also linked with poor eating habits as well. And these things really stood out to me because when I think back to being in college and feeling like I'm missing out on different opportunities, whether that be social or eating opportunities, it would always bring on a lot more anxiety than it would be like, oh, I'm sticking to my goals, okay? I didn't look at it from a positive point of view. I looked at it from a scarcity mindset. And I see this continuously come up with a lot of clients because they go out to dinner and they want to say no to more food, right? But they're not paying attention to how they currently feel, as well as really uncovering kind of some of the mental, trauma, if you will, from previous experiences growing up. I find that a lot of my clients who have struggled with this in the past are usually people that have tried to fit in around food, or they've used food as a vehicle to be more social and just go bonkers with. Now, if you're someone who does this guilt-free and it absolutely doesn't affect you, more power to you. The reason I'm bringing this up is because there's a lot of people out there, a lot of men out there that struggle with saying no to different things like alcohol, saying no to porn, saying no to distracting themselves, like looking at other females and stuff while they have an intimate relationship with someone. There's also a lot of men that can't say no to food. And what this does is that when you make promises to yourself to stay in line with your fitness goals, and you make a promise to yourself to get your health in shape and commit to a goal, when you make those promises and you break them continuously over a period of time because you lack self-discipline or you have this fear of missing out when it comes to food, it creates this negative relationship with yourself. You won't be able to bet on yourself. You feel shitty about all the decisions that you've made during the weekend, and you end up regretting it on Sunday when you're getting ready for the upcoming week. And I've been in that exact situation, that exact hamster wheel for so many years before I really started to impact my own fitness journey by learning things and taking in new information and trying out different methods that work for me. Let's continue with looking at the research. It's believed that time spent on social networking sites activates the amygdala and fear pathway, rendering young adults vulnerable to feeling of loneliness and socially disconnected. This contributes to a cyclical nature of FOMO, fear of missing out, where an individual engages with SNS to alleviate feelings of loneliness, but in fact exacerbates them. And I feel like this definitely ties into food as well. There would be so many times where I'd had opportunities to stay disciplined with my fitness goals, and basically this anxiety of just like, not being to my fitness goals yet and feeling lonely, I would use food as an outlet at one point in time. And that's one of the biggest reasons I wanted to tie this into a fitness journey and FOMO, because I feel like it directly is hand in hand. A lot of times we have these goals, but the fear of missing out on different opportunities all across the board prevents us from really being able to stick with those things, okay? Now, from a research perspective, we do know that one of the best tactics to get rid of FOMO is as follows. The main treatment goal should be to control rather than abstinence. FOMO reduction is a novel, promising, specifically designed model aimed at building resilience by focusing on self-help literacy guide about the design and appropriate use of SNS. This is a book that they recommend through the research, and I definitely recommend reading it. I will be doing so myself, but a lot of the research points to this idea of control rather than totally get rid of things. And if we look at dieting culture in general, we can definitely make the assumption that most people go the exclusion route rather than doing the controlled route. And this is why I'm such a big believer in flexible dieting, tracking macros, because yes, this is a form of discipline. I wouldn't say it's a form of restriction, because you can be very flexible with that. But with that, you can still have control, okay? You can control what type of foods you're putting in your body, okay? You don't have to say no to carbs. You don't have to say no to oatmeal. You don't have to say no to sugary things. You don't have to say no to a lot of these things. It's a diet that allows you to fit different foods that you may or may not like. It allows you to fit different foods that you like into your diet, and you're going to be hitting different parameters and such. And really, even if you are following macros, it's very important to know that even if you mess up one day or 2 days or 3 days or even a whole week, you can still get back on track the following day. I find that a lot of clients who totally go off the deep end and quit on themselves is because they think that they have to live up to this perfect, like the pinnacle of fitness, right? You can never miss a day. You can never miss a workout. And if I miss a workout, I'm a failure. That's not true at all. I've missed so many workouts in my last 11 years. It's not even funny. Okay. I've definitely missed more than 50 to 100 workouts over the last 11 years because I didn't feel like going to the gym, had something else come up. I was too tired. I missed my alarm clock. The list of reasons goes on. And the reason I'm bringing this up to you is because it's important to remind yourself that this perfect pinnacle of it's important to remind you that you don't have to be perfect to accomplish a fitness journey and make serious results. Okay. I'm not perfect. You're probably not perfect either. It's very hard to control all of these different things. So I just wanted to leave you with that in regards to the research. Now, we do have a couple different methods here that I have formulated just from looking at different articles online, as well as things that have worked for me. And I wanted to share that with you. Number one is to do exactly what I just said and ditch diets that restrict food groups. Okay. As the research suggests, control is much better than abstinence. And we want to make sure that ditching, these like fad diets that are very restrictive and totally just block out a lot of calories by eliminating a food group is not going to be a very is not going to be a very smart decision to make. Okay. Now, the second one is pay attention to how full you are. And one thing that I like to do halfway through a meal out while at dinner is I like to put my fork and knife down and just sit. Okay. I try to let myself go for about 5 minutes halfway through every meal. And this allows me to chew my food slowly, but it also allows me to just take a stop, okay? The slower we eat food, the more full we will be. And that's basically because the time it takes to communicate to your body that you are full. And that's why a lot of you have food challenges or eating challenges, they try and do these things very fast, because if they spread it out over a longer period of time, they will get full faster. So number 3 is going to be enjoy the conversation and go out of your way to start it. Whenever you're out at dinner, it's very easy for you to be focused on the food. What I recommend is that we pair that boredom, okay, that you're feeling with some type of sensation. But hopefully we can get this from a cold glass of water or a 0-calorie Diet Coke. That's my personal preference on how to do that, and how to take my mind off of like, okay, I want to try that appetizer. Instead, I will just have a Diet Coke, save the calories, and still get a nice sensation through my mouth, okay? And it sounds a little bit weird, but there is a lot of different research out there when it comes to pairing habits with things that feel good. And that's one of the ways that you can make it that much easier for you to say no to other food groups and options. It's more of a distraction, if you will. And number 4 would be eat enough food before the meal out. So if you're planning on having dinner, fasting all day is one of the worst things that you can do, because when you get to that dinner, 1, you're ravenous, and 2, self-control goes totally out the window. And instead of having a balanced relationship with eating out where you just go to the restaurant and have an entree and say no to your appetizer and dessert and alcohol as well, then you end up having a free-for-all, and you end up eating your appetizer, your entree, maybe a little bit of someone else's, dessert, and then drinks on top of that. And that could easily be a 3,000 calorie dinner right there without you noticing it too much. I also personally like to eat out because it makes me feel full before I actually go there. So what I like to do is about an hour and a half or 2 hours before a dinner, I will have plenty of protein and a little bit of vegetables beforehand, okay? This is ultimately going to make me more satiated. It's going to make me feel more full. And then from there, I'm also going to feel very full from the vegetables and how voluminous they are too. And one that really helps me combat this fear of FOMO and not having self-control at dinners is to think about how many times you've been in this exact scenario and you've made the mistake of losing control. I often find that when I try and limit my, let's call it bad behavior with out of control eating, I always find it easier to say no when I really sit there and take 1 to 2 minutes to think about what I'm about to do. Okay, Alan, you're going to eat this food here. You're going to lose control. All right. You're not practicing any form of restraint. How is that going to make you feel? How many times have you already done this to yourself where you just feel like total garbage after? And whenever I say that to myself, I always remember how I used to just endlessly eat at every dinner meal out. Okay. And this comes from, my childhood of never, I used to always go back for seconds and even thirds all the time. I used to eat until my stomach felt like it was actually imploding. Okay. There would be times where I was a child where I'd eat so much, I couldn't even go to bed. I'd have to make myself throw up. And it wasn't more of a throw up to lose weight. It was more of a discomfort thing. And ever since I've gone into adulthood, I've always had a hard time saying no to food more and more and more. And I'll tell you one thing, from someone who really struggled to do this, it is a work in progress at all times. Okay. You never necessarily look at food differently, but what you can do is try and reinforce that identity change and really become the person that has that self-control and that self-discipline to enjoy other parts of the conversation, say no to one thing so that you can have another and have that balance. And it is a work in progress always. And the last thing is that I want you to try unfollowing different things that drive unproductive temptations. Okay. A A lot of times on social media, we follow people that we emulate, or we follow people that we want to be like. We follow people that distract us and take us out of our normal lives. This is a hot topic of conversation because I feel like a lot of people don't know how destructive this behavior is. And the reason I bring it up is because I personally see firsthand from working with clients one-on-one that there is a big comparison factor out there on Instagram, okay? I have clients tell me, hey, how realistic is it for me to get to this body? Or how do I look like him? Or how do I get my pecs to look like this guy's pecs? And all of the above. And it goes from everything to upper body, lower body, like structure, all of that. And what I always tell them is that you have different genetics. What you should do is try and limit your exposure to that, because what it's doing is basically giving your body this false idea or false expectation that you're eventually going to look that way. So there's been a lot of times on social media over the years, and I run my entire life through this. So I've had a lot of practice with trying to limit my focus and narrow it down. And I always find that I feel a lot worse when I start my day by scrolling. I feel a lot worse when I compare myself to this person or this body or that body. And even I do it too. As a personal trainer and coach, I have done it for years. But what I try and do is limit that behavior to help me regain that confidence and just be happy with what I have on my own. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. It's near and dear to my heart, and several of my clients have gone on calls with me and talked about this as well. And I wanted to make a podcast addressing it in full. So if you are someone who has struggled to say no to food, you've struggled with, controlling yourself at the dinner table or stopping yourself from having too many drinks, please try your best to not only research this topic on your own, but also try and implement some of the tips from this video and see if they help. All I'm trying to do with this podcast is spread the message, help, and make sure that we build your body. Have a great one, and I'll talk to you soon.